The time for the guillemots has come. From the first days of April until the end of May, when Parisian holidaymakers are not yet even contemplating their trips, elderly gentlemen in high boots and tightly fastened hunting jackets appear as if from nowhere on the tiny beach at Étretat. They stay at the Oval Hotel for 4 or 5 days, vanish, only to reappear 3 weeks later, and, after a brief stay, leave these parts for good. And the following spring, it all repeats. They are the last of the guillemot hunters, a handful of veterans. Some 30 or 40 years ago, there were about 20 of these enthusiasts. Now, only a few of the most devoted remain. The guillemot is a rare migratory bird with remarkable habits. For almost the entire year, it lives off the shores of Newfoundland and the islands of St. Pierre and Miquelon. But when the season of love arrives, the flocks unfailingly cross the ocean. They build their nests and raise their young in one single place, on the famous Guillemot Rock near Étretat. They can be found only here. They have always flown here, they have always been hunted here, and yet they return again and will return forever. As soon as the chicks are fledged, the guillemots depart and disappear for a whole year. Why do they not choose another refuge? Why do they not fly to another part of this severe, chalky coast that stretches from the Pas-de-Calais to Le Havre? What irresistible force, what profound instinct, what age-old habit drives these birds back? What drew them here the very first time? Perhaps a storm once cast their ancestors upon this rock. But then why do their children, grandchildren, and all subsequent generations invariably follow the same path? There are not many of them, 100 at most, as if only one single family preserves the tradition of this annual pilgrimage. And every spring, as soon as the nomadic tribe settles on the rock, the same hunters appear in the village. They were once known as young men. Now they are gray-haired old men, but they are faithful to a vow, to meet here every year, which they gave to one another 40 years ago. Nothing in the world would make them break their word. It happened one April evening. 3 of the guillemot hunters had already arrived. Only Monsieur Darnell's was missing. He had sent no letter, no word. However, he had not died like some of their comrades. That would have been known. Finally, tired of waiting, the arrivals sat down to supper. The meal was nearly over when a carriage rolled into the inn's courtyard, and presently the belated hunter crossed the threshold of the dining room. Vigorously rubbing his hands, he took his place at the table and ate with a wolfish appetite. And when one of his friends expressed surprise at seeing him in a frock coat, he calmly said, "Yes, simply didn't have time to change." Upon leaving the table, everyone immediately retired for the night. For the next day, they had to rise before dawn to catch the birds by surprise. What could be more wonderful than this hunt, this morning excursion? At 3 o'clock, the sailors wake the hunters by throwing handfuls of sand against the window panes. A minute later, everyone is dressed and out on the slope. The night is still thick, but the stars are already fading. The sea whispers over the shingle, and the wind is so fresh that, despite their warm clothing, a slight shiver runs through them. Now 2 boats, pushed by the sailors, slide easily down the slope covered with rounded pebbles. A sound like tearing canvas is heard, and now they are rocking in the shallows. The brown sails are hoisted. They flutter, fill, tighten, and, rounded like bubbles, carry the tarred shells towards the harbor mouth, dimly visible in the darkness. The sky pales, the gloom seems to melt. The line of the white shore emerges, sheer as a wall, still shrouded in morning mist. They pass the immense rocky arch of the Manport, under which a whole ship can freely pass, round the Courtine headland, then the Andifer Valley, the cape of the same name, and suddenly a beach opens up, thronged with hundreds of gulls. And there is the Guillemot Rock. It is merely a small outcrop of the rocky shore. On the narrow ledges of the white cliff, the black heads of birds are visible, watching the approaching boats. They sit motionless, waiting with no thought of flight. Some are perched right on the very edge, and from a distance resemble bottles standing upright. The guillemot's legs are so short that when they walk, they seem to roll like toys on wheels. They cannot take flight from a standstill. To take to the air, they must first hurl themselves like a stone from the cliff, so they fall almost to the feet of the men waiting for them. They are aware of their helplessness, aware of how dangerous it is for them, and therefore they are slow to attempt escape. But the sailors raise a deafening cry, beat the oars against the sides of the boats, and then the frightened birds, one after another, plunge down into the void, falling almost to the water itself, only to then, with furious beats of their wings, speed away to the open sea, until a leaden downpour hurls them into the waves. This continues for a whole hour. They are flushed out and shot down one by one. Sometimes the females, sitting on their eggs, refuse to leave their nests. Then they're killed on the spot. Scarlet drops spatter the white stone, and the birds die without leaving their clutch. On the first day, D'Arnelles hunted with his customary zeal, but around 10 o'clock, as they set off on the return journey beneath the blinding, high-riding sun whose rays flooded the fissures of the white cliffs, painting vast triangles of light, he frowned and, contrary to his habit, sank deeper and deeper into his thoughts. No sooner had the party returned to Étretat than a man dressed in black, who resembled a valet, approached D'Arnelles and spoke to him in a low voice. D'Arnelles seemed to ponder, hesitated, and finally said curtly, "No, tomorrow." The following day, the hunt resumed. This time, D'Arnelles kept missing, even though the birds were falling literally at the muzzle of his gun. His comrades teased him, probing to see if some secret amorous agitation had seized his heart, or if passion had clouded his reason. Finally, he could bear it no longer and confessed, "Well, it's true. I shall have to leave soon, and I'm devilishly annoyed about it." "What, you're leaving? Why on earth?" "An urgent matter. I simply cannot stay any longer." The conversation turned to other things. They had scarcely finished breakfast when the same man in black reappeared. D'Arnelles ordered him to harness the horses, and the servant was already heading for the door when the 3 other hunters intervened, beginning to fervently and persistently persuade their friend to stay. Finally, the most resolute of them asked, "But perhaps this matter isn't so very important, since you've already postponed it for 2 days?" The hunter fell silent, visibly embarrassed, torn between temptation and duty. He was dejected, troubled, and confused. After thinking it over carefully, he muttered indecisively, The fact is that I am not here alone. I have my son-in-law with me." This provoked an explosion of astonished exclamations. "Your son-in-law? But where is he?" D'Arnelles grew embarrassed and reddened. "What? You don't know? But he's in the shed. He is dead." A tomb-like silence fell, filled with amazement. D'Arnelles continued, becoming even more flustered and confused. "I've had a misfortune. I've lost him. I was transporting the body to my estate in Brisville and made a small detour so as not to miss our gathering. But you understand, I really cannot delay any longer." Then the most quick-witted of the hunters stated firmly, "But since he is already dead, It seems to me. He can certainly wait another day. The other two immediately supported him. Undoubtedly, undoubtedly, they said in chorus. Darnell seemed to feel enormous relief, but, still slightly anxious, he asked again. Truly, you think so? And his three comrades answered as one. Of course, my dear fellow. A couple of days, what difference does it make? For him, it signifies absolutely nothing now. Then, completely reassured, the father-in-law turned to the servant and said simply, Very well, my friend. We shall postpone everything until the day after tomorrow.